edition of our unique Newcastle United podcast with me, Geordie Pete Redding. It's been a bit of a reality check for Newcastle United in the last few weeks actually. The last couple of games haven't panned out exactly as they would. So who better than to talk us through it than Arab News' very own sports editor, Ali Khaled. Ali, how are you?
I'm very well, Pete. How are you?
Very good, thanks. Very good. A little nervous, but we'll touch on why I'm still relatively happy and still relatively safe in the knowledge that Newcastle are not far from safety. But let's get back to that. I mentioned a reality check, and boy, was it.
Yes, I mean, this was the match we feared a little bit last time we chatted about, because we said the previous two defeats against Chelsea and Everton had been very narrow, obviously. Newcastle have played relatively well in those games, almost got a point out of each one of them. And both goals that lost those two games were very, very late goals. But we did say that Tottenham was, would be a different kind of match. And it came after the break here in Dubai. And what we worried about was, Kane and Son, obviously. I mean, it's,
Sure.
The obvious danger man. But really it was about, said like if there was one team at the moment who's playing really, really well and like playing very, very attacking football under Conte, I think, they had some inconsistent results, but the trend has been a very good one, for Tottenham. And we said if there is a team that can nick those goals, that can make you pay for any defensive mistakes, it's Tottenham. It's Tottenham's, with Harry Kane and Son, and Harry Kane ended up having a fantastic game. I mean, I know he didn't score, but he was absolutely brilliant. Directing operations, dropping deep, passing the ball all around, ran the game from the middle of the park. His passing was sensational, and I think Newcastle, played probably the worst match since Eddie Howe took over. I think the defense got shown up a little bit, and you and I had this chat before, Pete. Dan Burn probably had his worst game for the club. I mean, it's a bit harsh, you don't want to have like going too harsh on him, but it's the first time that he got given a bit of a run around.
It was a naive performance, to say the least, Ali, and I think that it was shown in Dan Burn's performance along with others. But the fact that you stated that surely they must have known that Harry Kane and Son were the danger men. Harry Kane running the game as he did, Ginola likened him to one Diego Maradona. Such was the effect he had on that match.
Well, I mean, that's high praise indeed. Maybe I wouldn't go that far, but he was sensational. I think the passing is effortless. I mean, some of it, he's got that trademark where when he gets it and he curls it to the right wing. But some of his crossfield passing was a bit like Trent Alexander-Arnold. He'll spot the left back going down the wing, and or the left winger, and it just seems so easy for him. And he's got willing runners in that team. They're a very, very dynamic team. Son is the obvious one. As we know that they've got the record number of goal combination between the two of them for a Premier League season. So we specifically mentioned those two before the match, and they both came through. And obviously the rest of the team played well as well. And it's I'm not sure if taking the lead helped or didn't help. I wouldn't suggest, Eddie Howe. Sorry, I mean, I would suggest Eddie Howe would not let this team, be overconfident, and certainly not on the back of two defeats. But I'm not sure. It was just a very loose performance. It looked like, they were maybe a little bit more relaxed than usual. And while the situation in the table, should mean they are not as nervous. I don't think, they could have, it's a match to take lightly. I don't think they took it lightly. I just think that Tottenham on the day were far, far better.
Far superior. We like positive news on this podcast, and we've had plenty in the last 10 episodes or so. So let's reintroduce that. It hasn't affected the table, thankfully, because the clubs around them have struggled as well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you know what? Until Burnley's win over Everton, there had been no change in the table at all, with Newcastle's last three defeats, because, as you say, the bottom three have really not inched forward at all, and, this is one of the things we've we've mentioned over the last few weeks, that it's not a time to panic for Newcastle, because they put together that excellent unbeaten run, and which every club,
that's the catalyst now, isn't it? It looks
that's
like
every club is looking for that run, and Newcastle have had this, I keep saying this week after week, these clubs at the bottom have gotten to the point now where they're saying, right, we need 10 points or we need 12 points from the remaining games and all that. And, there's a reason why you're at the bottom, is because you haven't been able to get those 10 points in 5 or 6 games or whatever it is, So while Newcastle actually, went ahead and got that run with, 8 or 9 games left. So, I mean, again, it's not a time to panic. Nothing much has changed, except for, Burnley beating Everton. But obviously, wow. I mean, even that, brings its own good news, in that Everton get dragged into it and they don't get closer to Newcastle. So that Burnley-Everton game was always going to have some sort of good news for Newcastle anyway, and for the teams above Everton.
The other ramification for that, Ali, the other ramification for Everton in that is that, of course, it's a defeat, but they'll be wary of the Burnley and the Sean Dyche factor, because people were saying maybe Burnley wouldn't escape this time. But with Sean Dyche, you never know. With Burnley, you never know. They've now given themselves a massive chance, and that trajectory that they're on after that win and the way Everton are playing, Burnley will fancy staying up now.
Absolutely. I mean, it's down to 1 point now between those two clubs, and obviously had Everton won, it would have been 7 the other way. And now it's just down to 1. And obviously, you can talk about the momentum Burnley will get from this win, like the positivity that will go through the club. And conversely, the mood at Everton is absolutely so downbeat, that most fans believe that, they really are going down now, like a lot of them are almost resigned to their fate. But I think also the other big thing, the absolutely massive factor, is the difference in their the remaining fixtures. I mean, if you look at the fixtures, and Burnley's is far easier. I'm not necessarily mean that they're going to be, getting wins, consecutive wins or anything, but just at least you can look at there are opportunities there. Everton's is horrific.
I wanted to look at this weekend, because the scenario is that Everton could end up in the bottom 3, because they've got a tough task. Everton are the early game tomorrow, and they play Manchester United. Really tough game. Burnley have got a real opportunity, because they go to fellow strugglers Norwich. It could be all turned around come
that's
the weekend.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I'd imagine Burnley have a really good chance of beating Norwich. I mean, they are away, but Norwich are almost gone.
And on a high.
And yeah, absolutely, Burnley are on a high. So you'd expect them to win that. The Everton, Man United, I mean, Manchester United are not playing very well. But you can see a draw, and which is no good to Everton at the moment. You're not going to fly up the table with too many draws. So I think and obviously United are very capable of beating Everton. Especially Everton with no confidence at the moment. So they could be in the bottom 3 by the weekend, and they don't play the following week because it's FA Cup semi-final week, and I think it just interfered with so they could maybe even fall further behind. And what I've heard a lot of Everton fans say, if we get into the bottom 3, we're not getting out of it, because this group of players doesn't seem to have a fight in them.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Let's look at the teams in and around the Toon, so to speak. So Leeds United, they go to Watford. Although Leeds have looked a much brighter and better side, Ali, it's still a tough fixture, that one. And then Sunday also sees another club in the vicinity of the Toon is Brentford, and they've got West Ham at home. So if Newcastle can engineer that result tonight, that would be a major step forward, a great result, and then see what the rest of the weekend brings.
Yeah, I mean, the Watford Leeds game is another one of those that is going to benefit Newcastle or the teams trying to escape relegation.
Absolutely.
Either way, really, it's a 6-pointer, as I say, between two relegation battles. I mean, I would imagine Leeds will pull away at some point, and Watford, a Leeds win against Watford, might condemn Watford. I'm not sure. Obviously nothing is mathematical at the point, but a lot of it is about momentum, as we say. A lot of it is about like putting those extra points, a little bit more of a gap. So whichever way Watford Leeds goes, I'm sure Newcastle will find positivity in that. Burnley, as we mentioned, play Norwich. So again, Norwich are probably gone already. Possibly would expect Burnley to win that. And Everton, play Man United, as we mentioned. So I think, Newcastle going back now after those 3 tough away matches, got 3 home games coming up, starting with Wolves. It's looking, again, like we specifically mentioned the Tottenham game, said, that could be one that, they lose. I predicted a loss. I didn't think it will be that heavy, obviously, but I did say also, even with a loss, it should not be a time to panic, because the other clubs face more difficult fixtures, are already there's a bit of a gap in points to the bottom 3, and you've got those 3 home games coming up. So yeah, I mean, I think Eddie Howe will be quite calm about the coming games. He did say last week in one of his press conferences, he goes, the next 3 games could really, really sort of define the rest of the season. Honestly, I mean, like with one, one win, a couple of draws.
Let me put this to you, Ali, because I would say that given before the Spurs game and looking ahead to tonight's Wolves game, I wanted to put this scenario to you. Before the Spurs game, Eddie Howe had a lot of players back at his disposal, Joe Linton, and it was a case of who do you fit in where. This reality check and defeat has possibly made his task easier to bring changes about for tonight's game. And I could possibly see Bruno starring a lot more, because out of the shambles, which was the Spurs game, I think he was possibly one of the only shining lights coming on for a cameo. So maybe that heavy defeat makes it a little easier for Eddie to switcheroo.
Yes, I think that's the obvious one, and also I think maybe Bruno Guimaraes didn't start because obviously he had been playing for Brazil, traveling, and as we know, he did very well for Brazil. So I think a lot of the managers these days, when the players come back from South America, they tend to give them a bit of a rest, and again, I think Eddie Howe's being quite smart about this. It was a massive game, of course, but he's not panicking. This was not like a win at all costs match, where he needed to throw in all his best players. So he saved them, and he has been very, very careful with Bruno Guimaraes in general. I do think that the time has come for him to start matches, regularly, and I think he might have if there hadn't been an international break and he hadn't gone to South America. So yes, I think he will start in this one. Elsewhere. Lascelles. I mean, I think dropping. Dan Burn had a tough day, as we mentioned, but again, you and I were having a chat about it, and you said it will be a tough one to drop him. I think in terms of confidence and in terms of, it's almost like this is your first bad game, you're out of the team. So I feel like he'll stick with him.
More of a reshuffle.
Yes, I think he'll stick with him, and he might not make wholesale changes again, just to show some of the he's been saying that I'm sticking with this team because this is a team that's done so well for me. He mentioned that a few times about the midfield and all that. So I think I don't think he will have too many changes at the first sign of trouble. Although you could say it's been 3 matches, but really it's the Tottenham game that was a really bad performance. So I think he'll be reasonable about it. He'll tweak the team, and I think Bruno will come into it. But I think Dan Burn will keep his place.
I've got to ask you as well, because it's a major concern for me, and we're talking, and obviously we're concentrating on shipping 5, which isn't great, but they just don't look like scoring again. They've gone back to that they've gone back to that. There were people chipping in with goals. There were goals coming in. Joe Willock had started to chip back in again. They just don't look like it. And then you couple that with the worry at the back. The return of Callum Wilson can't come soon enough, because I don't mean to criticise Chris Wood, but he is carrying the flag for goals up front, and I'm sure that when Wilson does return, it will be a great partnership. But currently, we're struggling for goals.
Yeah, and unfortunately, like, you're watching that games and you couldn't see with Wood up front, like where the goals are going to come from, and that's been the case with him. Like a very willing worker, as a lot of people have pointed out. But it doesn't carry the goal threat. Goal threat has to come from midfield at the moment. Allan Saint-Maximin, I know Newcastle fans at the moment. There's a big debate about him. He is a fan favorite, as we all know. But there is a debate about him. Is he producing? Has he been inconsistent and all that? And I'm surprised. We shouldn't take everything that happens on Twitter seriously, but there are debates going on about, like, should he be starting even? And and he's got his critics. Probably a little bit more than I thought. I thought, like, he's probably as a fan favorite, sort of immune from some of the criticism that goes to other players, but he's not. And a lot of fans have been saying he's been inconsistent, so that hasn't helped. That hasn't
without
helped,
sitting on the fence. Without sitting on the fence, Ali, he does divide opinion amongst the fan base. Now, interestingly, I'll put two sides of the story to you, and I don't think either of them are wrong. They're factual. One opinion, and this comes from former players at Newcastle, former French internationals, ex-French managers and coaches, that he is not a team player, that there isn't 90 minutes in him. He's a bit of an enigma. The other side of that is that if it wasn't for him, given Newcastle would be dead and buried. He is an exciting player, and let's not forget, at 25 years old, he still has a lot to learn. There are pros and cons, like there are for any footballer, but it's interesting to hear, because a player of such talent, in my opinion, should be pushing for that international call. But according to a lot of people in the know and French journalists and friends of ours, he's nowhere near international levels. So is it just that consistency that he needs to deliver, a few good 90-minute performances off the belt, rather than coming on and as an impact player?
Yeah, I mean, the 2 points you made, can, as you say, it divides opinion. Some people think one thing, some people think the other. But the truth is you can think both of them are true, So in that, he was one of Newcastle's few, like, bright spots when, under Ashley and Steve Bruce, and did carry the team in a lot of matches. But that was at a time when, Newcastle, were not an inspired team. They were quite a defensive team. They didn't have the atmosphere was flat. The stadium was flat, and he took it upon himself. He would get the ball and he would run with it, and he'd give a bit of excitement to the fans. And there weren't that many options. The team wasn't playing well. It was not like a very tactically aware team. Beyond being quite defensive. So that is true in that, without him, Newcastle would have been maybe in an even worse position. But it's also true that since Eddie Howe has come, Newcastle plays slightly differently now. Well, not slightly differently, much differently,
Yeah.
They play on the front foot. There's a lot more options going forward. In terms of tactics, the team is far better than it was before, So, maybe he needs to tweak the way he plays as well, Sure. He gets the ball sometimes, and it excites fans, all the tricks, but he still has maybe a tendency to put his head down and go down blind alleys, as I say,
Barrack Road.
Yeah. and maybe, like, not pass when he should, and you don't always have to beat the man, and we kind of still expect every time he gets the ball that he's going to do something really, really exciting, get the ball and just run at defenders. But maybe Eddie Howe has got the team playing in a slightly different way that requires him to play in a slightly be a little bit more consistent, not give the ball away as much and all that. Maybe it's all these little things that have stopped him, taking that last step, to be considered an international player.
Case in point for Eddie Howe, go no further than Pep Guardiola with a certain Jack Grealish at Manchester City. It doesn't. It's a similar thing. I watched Jack Grealish, and there's no doubt in his talent. Of a similar ilk, can change a game per se, as per Allan Saint-Maximin. But again, it's happening there with Jack Grealish, because he tends to slow down that City juggernaut of passing. So if Pep Guardiola's having a struggle with it as well, then I think your point is extremely valid, that the player may need to look to tweak certain aspects. And I'm sure Alan's looked at that, because, again, I noticed in the Spurs game, I did notice he played a lot more with his back to goal, and he was laying the ball off, and he was dropping deeper. So hopefully that's something that they're working on, because at the end of the day, you can't not want to have a player of Allan Saint-Maximin. Someone said on Twitter just yesterday that literally he is possibly the most exciting young winger in the Premier League, if not in Europe. So he got to get it right.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I mean, it's a really good point about Grealish. Pep Guardiola is a very good example, because Pep Guardiola and Manchester City are a very good example, because, as teams get better, players that in previous teams, or even in the same team, when they were not performing as well, when you really stand out, when sort of you're the maverick, you take the match by the scruff of the neck, you're trying to do everything yourself. As teams improve, you really have to settle into a system, and sacrifice. So Grealish is a good point. Pep Guardiola did that with Raheem Sterling. I mean, Raheem Sterling, when Pep Guardiola came, Raheem Sterling was getting a few criticisms, because his end result was not always, coming out end product, and he really molded him into a fantastic player and a fantastic team player. And Riyad Mahrez at Leicester was the main man. Obviously a lot of creativity went through him and all that, and he comes to Manchester City, and he's not necessarily the standout player, because there's so many others,
the team,
and Kevin De Bruyne being the obvious one, as well as Bernardo Silva. So you have to adapt to the team system, and then eventually all your creativity will be molded into the team, and you can still provide, as Mahrez has done, and as Sterling has done, and probably Jack Grealish will do. And these are examples. I mean, back in the day, when Liverpool were struggling a little bit, Steven Gerrard would carry the team, trying to do everything himself.
Sure.
Doing all the tackling, running all over the pitch and all that. And then Rafa Benitez came, and Liverpool improved, and he put in a system, which was occasionally slightly defensive, slightly rigid, and Gerrard wasn't allowed to do as much as what he used to do before, on his own. But the team improved, and he had to use, his skills within that system.
And he did the same at Newcastle. I mean, well-loved Rafa. Absolutely incredible. Perhaps, whisper it quietly, maybe he could have stayed at Everton. Don't shoot the messenger. Okay, listen, we can't let this episode go by, Ali, without mentioning the World Cup. Much to my chagrin, and I've spoken to a lot of people about this, and I thought, first and foremost, let me congratulate FIFA on what can be a difficult occasion to try and fashion a live show around a World Cup draw. But I think, first and foremost, I think they did that well. I thought the draw, if not a little confusing, it was certainly, it had all the razzmatazz. It was done very well, and I loved the choice of legends to come onto the stage. There was many of them, standouts, Lothar Matthäus, and absolutely fantastic to see people from all over the world of football. I eventually did get my head around it. So let's stick with the footballing side of the World Cup draw, because it's an absolute. When you sit back and take note, the intro was correct. The first World Cup finals, hopefully of many, to be in our region. It's fantastic when you sit back and look at it.
It is. I mean, hopefully, once things settle, now everything's settling down. Everyone knows, the match schedule. They know when their teams are playing and all that, so people can start making their plans to go. For people like us in the region, we can start making plans. And I know there are certain issues about hotel rooms, are there going to be enough hotels? What's travel going to be like? All of these things hopefully will become clearer in the coming months. But it's always good. It's you finally feel the World Cup's here once you see those groups.
Yeah.
And I think for the region, there's 4 Arab teams in the World Cup, and so Saudi Arabia are in the same group as Argentina, Mexico, and Poland. I mean, that's very, very tough. I don't think there's across the whole tournament, there's no massively standout like group of death as they call it. But this one is very, very tough.
But for the Saudi fans, Ali, to get to see Messi,
they get to see. I mean, they get to play against Messi, Lewandowski, and obviously, like for Saudi fans to get there, will be easier than for a lot of other fans, and I think, there's, the other ones is that, Qatar play with Ecuador, Senegal, and Netherlands, so that's, a good group for them, although obviously I still think the favorites in that group will be Senegal and the Netherlands. Morocco play with Belgium, Canada, and Croatia. So again, like they're all like you could find like these really, really interesting games without anything being like completely, sort of, as you say, like a group of death, something that's like an impossible group to get out of. Tunisia, however, I mean, the last of the Arab teams is I think it's quite difficult. They've ended up with France and Denmark, and the last playoff place in that, the last place in that group will go to the playoff, which could be Peru, Australia, or the UAE. So. So like there's still a hope, like slender hope, but hope that one more Arab team will make it, which is the United Arab Emirates. But
let me ask you about that, Ali. What do UAE have to do? I mean, let's be right about it. You say slender chance. They've got a lot of work to do, haven't they?
They do. I mean, they finished third in their Asian group. Australia finished third in the other Asian group, so they will play each other, and the winner of that tie will have to play Peru. From the South American, who finished 5th in the South American group. So, you really have to win 2 matches. And for the UAE to qualify, they have to beat Australia and Peru. Not impossible, but very, very difficult, And, but, like, Pete, there's a few other, like, really, really interesting matches going on. I mean, with historical significance. I think, the US against England.
Yeah.
I know they played in 2010, but, like, historically, the 1950 match is still a very famous one. I think, Ghana are going to play Uruguay again. So for everyone who hates Luis Suarez and still thinks that, he cheated Ghana out of in 2010 with his handball, there is like a chance for revenge there, So, yeah, there's a few like of these matches going around there. Some really, really interesting, like kind of obviously, everyone will be keeping an eye on Qatar, as a home nation, the first ever home nation, host of a World Cup, never to have played in the World Cup before. So, there's a lot of interesting stories going on.
A lot of firsts. I have to say, you mentioned that England-USA game. The first person that wouldn't have been happy to see that draw come out because he knew he was going to be all over the papers, and he was Rob Green, the goalkeeper. And he basically said, let's hope someone can put that issue to bed for me, he said, because I knew when I woke up the next morning, I would be all over the papers for the wrong reason. And of course, I'm referring to that awful howler in the game that Ali mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant stuff. Listen, Ali, we're just about out of time for this week, but what we did want to do was give our listeners a sort of, we've got some great guests in the coming weeks, none more so than a hero of mine next week. I don't want to give too much away, but it's a very exciting player who probably was at the start of Kevin Keegan's revolution, I would imagine. Can't wait to speak to him and the goals he scored for Newcastle United. A firm fan favourite. He'll be coming up next week. Brilliant stuff. Can't wait for it.
Me too, mate. I know, again, I'm not going to give anything away. I know who you're talking about. I know some of the others who are going to come after that. And always great to have all these ex-legends, ex-Newcastle United legends come in. And also, like, a lot of people from the Newcastle community that we've got lined up who are going to come up. And we're hoping to bring more and more people into that. So looking forward to that. And, beyond the season itself, which will hopefully have a happy ending for all concerned, we'll start looking towards the World Cup and the new season, of course. And so there'll be a lot of links, a lot of guests who will have links to the World Cup as well and to international football. So plenty coming along soon.
So all that remains is for me to wish you a very happy Friday. It's a great day in Newcastle on a Friday anyway. Couple that with a home game underneath the floodlights, lots of noise. Let's hope for 3 points. That's it from us on Black and White with Arab News. How are the lads?